All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Mr. Anderson, and we are breaking out of this matrix one step at a time. I have Heliocentrism and the Luciferian Scientific Dictatorship, Part 6. And we'll go right on in. I'm not going to bother with the subtitle, of course, like last time. And right to the pendulum. Okay, so this pendulum, they're saying they swing this pendulum and that it precesses a little bit. And this is allegedly proof that the Earth is moving. But here's one of the problems, other than it being on the same reference frame, so on and so forth. 1954 and 1959, Maurice Allias noticed that during a solar eclipse, which lasted 2.5 hours, the angle of the pendulum changed dramatically by 13.5 degrees. This has been repeatedly observed and with positive results on most of the subsequent eclipses, which obviously means that the pendulum isn't registering Earth's rotation, but the motion of something else instead. Alright? So, Foucault's pendulum always rotates clockwise in the northern hemisphere. And we have cyclones and hurricanes counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. And the alleged cause of both of these things is the turning of the Earth. How's that? Okay. The strange story of the eclipse and the pendulum. Because the precession is due to the Earth's rotation, allegedly. Traditional physics says the rate of precession should be the same during an eclipse as any other time. But when Allias did his experiment, he found that the rate of precession shifted during the eclipse. This came to be known as the Allias anomaly, or Allias effect, not to be confused with the Allias paradox, which deals with its economics work. This was unexpected and it generated a lot of criticism. On to Airys. Okay? And Malcolm Bowden, he does some great breakdowns. I know a lot of people have played his stuff. I'm going to play a clip of his work because it's like a 5-minute clip. I think this one's either 5.5, 6 minutes actually. And then the next clip I'm doing is 5 minutes, I believe. But I'm doing just a snippet so that we can understand what happened with this Airys experiment here. Hopefully the audio is going to work.
If a telescope is pointing at a star, and both are stationary, then obviously the light comes straight into the telescope. In 1729, Bradley found that he had to tip his telescope forward very slightly to get a star in the center of his telescope. It was assumed that this was due to the motion of the Earth around the Sun. Let us assume that the telescope was moving at 5 miles an hour and had to be tipped 5 degrees. This 5-degree tipping, however, could equally be caused by the Aether moving at 5 miles an hour, carrying the stars around the Earth. As we see here, the light would be coming in at the same angle and the telescope would still have to be tipped 5 degrees. So tipping the telescope does not tell us whether it is the starlight moving or the telescope moving. However, there is a simple experiment that can determine whether it was the Earth that was moving or the Aether and starlight. All that you had to do was record the tipping required for any particular star, then fill the telescope with water, which greatly slows down the speed of light in the telescope. So here is the moving telescope filled with water, tipped at 5 degrees, and you can see that the starlight does not now reach the eyepiece at the bottom. This is because the starlight moves much more slowly when passing through water. However, if the telescope is tipped further, say 10 degrees, then the starlight will then be visible again in the eyepiece. It has to be tipped further because the light is now slower when in the telescope. But if the starlight is going past the telescope at 5 miles an hour, then when it is filled with water, no further tipping is needed because the light is coming in at 5 degrees anyway. The starlight stays on the same path, but is only travelling slower in the water. To recap, if it is the telescope that is moving, then when it is filled with water, it has to be tipped further to see the star. If the telescope is stationary and the starlight drifting past us, then it does not have to be tipped further. In 1871, George Airys, the Astronomer Royal, performed this experiment. This is a copy from his original report. You can see that the two readings are virtually identical. If it had been the telescope that was moving, Airys expected a figure of 30 seconds of arc. In fact, he only managed to read 0.8 seconds of arc difference.
Uh-oh.
Bradley first discovered stellar aberration, and it is interesting that in his report, Airys mentions that it was now about 100 seconds of arc, and that it was still slowly diminishing. This indicates that the speed of light was still decreasing in measurable amounts when Airys performed his experiment in 1871. The result of Airys' experiment, known as Airys' failure, was that the telescope does not have to be tipped further. This proved that it was the incoming light that was moving past a stationary telescope fixed to the stationary Earth. What is interesting in his very brief report of only 4 pages is that not once did he refer to the astonishing results that the experiment proved, that the Earth was stationary.
What a shocker.
This experiment was also dismissed by Wikipedia, which said, Ether drag test, under the main article, Luminiferous Ether. By means of a water-filled telescope, Airys, in 1871, looked for a change in stellar aberration through the refracting water due to an ether drag. Like in all other ether drift experiments, he obtained a negative result.
Blatant lie. There it is, right there.
This is a gross distortion of the truth. That he did not have to change the angle proved that it was the ether drifting past the stationary surface of the Earth. This experiment is never taught to university science students. They might begin to question what they were being taught about the cosmos, the universe, the Big Bang, evolution, and much else, if it was realized that the Earth really is at the center of the universe, which is rotating around us.
Alright, so as you can see, there's a reason why I picked that exact 6-minute clip. Because what happens is, you'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll say, no, back then, this and this is what happened. They're referring to the mainstream reporting on stuff. That example was Wikipedia, but in general, when he did his paper with those 4 pages where he conveniently leaves out the important details, when the news goes and runs a story on that, are they going to suddenly have the important details? No. So this is gatekeeping, clearly. I'm going to do an even shorter video than that on Michaelson Morley. I'm just hitting on this because it's very, very important when it comes. That Airys thing alone disproves the Earth moving. So why are we talking about a moving Earth? This one's pretty short as well. It's very straight to the point.
In 1887, Michaelson and Morley carried out an experiment to check this speed of the Earth through the ether. they passed light through two long arms, one in the direction of the Earth's travel and the other at right angles to it. The light travelling in the direction of the Earth's travel should have taken longer to return than that travelling at right angles to the Earth's direction of travel. To the amazement of the scientific world, no such speed as 30 kilometers per second was detected. But they did get speeds between 1 and 10 kilometers per second. Ignoring these speeds, this experiment is always referred to as giving a null result. This shook the scientific world, and to overcome the implication that the Earth was stationary, they invented the Fitzgerald-Lorenz contraction. This claimed that the arm that was in the direction of the Earth's travel became shorter, so that the time to return was the same as in the other arm. There was absolutely no justification for such a solution. It was only invented to overcome the idea that the Earth was stationary in the ether. As Arthur Miller stated, this invention of the Fitzgerald-Lorenz contraction was a physics of desperation.
100%. I agree with that.
So troubling was this to scientists that eventually Einstein produced his relativity theory, by which he overcame the problem by simply abolishing the ether. He first said that he did not know of the Michaelson-Morley experiment, but later admitted that he produced his theory to overcome the Michaelson-Morley result. Einstein's biographer commented, "The problem that now faced science after the Michaelson-Morley null result was considerable, for there seemed to be only three alternatives. The first was that the Earth was standing still, which meant scuttling the whole Copernican theory and was unthinkable. The second was that the ether was carried along by the Earth in its passage through space, a possibility which had already been ruled out to the satisfaction of the scientific community by a number of experiments, notably those of the English astronomer James Bradley. The third solution was that the ether simply did not exist, which to many 19th century scientists was equivalent to scrapping current views of light, electricity and magnetism and starting again." Notice that the last two possibilities are quite different from the first one. The first possibility is rejected not because there was any scientific result that contradicted it. Indeed, it is the only one that fits all the results of the experiments carried out. The other two run into huge experimental problems, requiring much mathematical juggling and sleight-of-hand tricks to come to their defense. The first is rejected because of the purely philosophical horror of having to accept the possibility that the Earth truly is stationary and at the center of the rotating ether. The Earth really is at the center of the universe. It is the geocentric model that actually has by far the best support from the scientific results we have been examining and the simplest explanation of them. The Michaelson-Morley experiment is the only one of 4 experiments that is well known. The other 3 experiments never taught are: 1. The Michaelson-Gale experiment that showed that the ether was passing across the surface of the Earth once every 24 hours. 2. Airys failure experiment proved that it was the moving starlight carried by the rotating ether that was passing across the stationary Earth. 3. The Sagnac experiment that proved there was an ether, thus demolishing relativity theory. Let us examine briefly these 3 experiments. The Michaelson-Gale experiment used sealed tubes covering a large area that measured the speed of the ether relative to the surface of the Earth. They obtained a value that was within 2% of the known speed of about 0.45 kilometers per second at the equator. But this speed could have been due either to the Earth spinning in a stationary ether or the passing of the rotating ether around a stationary Earth.
Alright, so I capped it off right there. These videos are fantastic that Malcolm has done, but I wanted to keep it strictly on there. I do have this very, very short one. I think this one's like a minute long. Let me just finish out with this one.
Sagnac split a beam of light and sent the two beams in opposite directions around a path, recombined the beams and noted their interference fringes. The whole system was on a turntable, and he then turned it at 2 revolutions per second, remeasured the fringes and found that they had changed. This was due to the movement of the mirrors, made the path for one beam longer and the other shorter. This proved that the ether existed, because once the light left the source, its speed was controlled by the comparatively stationary ether in the laboratory. This demolished Einstein's relativity theory, which had abolished the ether. So, from these 4 experiments, it is obvious that the Earth is at the center of the universe, and the Sun, planets, moons and stars are all being swept around the stationary Earth. This is the only explanation that satisfies the most obvious results of all these 4 experiments. No wonder the universities distort the Michaelson-Morley experiment and do not teach the other 3 hidden experiments. So to summarize, the Michaelson-Morley experiment showed that the Earth was not going round the Sun. The Sagnac experiment showed that the ether did exist, thus demolishing relativity. The Michaelson-Gale experiment showed that the ether was passing across the Earth's surface once every 24 hours, and Airys' failure proved it was the Earth that was stationary and the ether was travelling around us.
There you go. That's very, very concise. That's why I included that in, because it's as concise as it gets. So, the rescue operation was performed by means of a purely metaphysical concept lifted directly from Professors Fitzgerald and Lorenz, who had also been trying to explain the results of the Michaelson-Morley experiment, and renamed by him the special theory of relativity. What was suggested was that if the dimensions of an object in motion were assumed to shrink exactly in proportion to the speed at which it was traveling by exactly the necessary amount, that's so convenient, mathematical calculations could be made to show that the Earth was in motion after all. No one has ever seen an object shrink as a result of being in motion. And indeed, one of the world's leading authorities on relativity, Dr. Herbert Ningel, was later to dismiss the theory of relativity as metaphysical nonsense with no basis on what could be observed. Goodbye. All right, just a second. Sorry about that. I coughed for a second. We have Einstein's space, De Sitter's space, expanding universes, contracting universes, vibrating universes, mysterious universes. In fact, the pure mathematician may create universes just by writing down an equation. And indeed, if he's an individualist, he can have a universe of his own. So that's like when you hear debaters and stuff like Austin Whitsitt say, oh, I can show you the math, the exact math for how Superman can fly. But that doesn't mean there's a Superman and that he flies, right? That's basically what J.J. Thompson's saying right here. You can build a bridge to nowhere with math. That's actually a very, very basic logical point. That's not even a hard point to grasp. You would have to be in severe cognitive dissonance not to understand that. Alright, so ironically, when special relativity failed due to its internal contradictions, Einstein had to invent general relativity to shore up the facade. And in the process, he had to take back the very two foundations he had discarded in special relativity. Namely, A, that nothing can exceed the speed of light, and B, the existence of ether. In the end, Einstein's theories were a mass of contradictions which are covered by obtuse mathematical equations. While I was thinking of this problem in my student years, I came to know the strange result of Michelson's experiment. Soon I came to the conclusion that the idea about the motion of the Earth with respect to the ether is incorrect. If we admit that Michelson's null result as a fact, this was the first path which led me to special theory of relativity. Since then, I have come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment, though the Earth is revolving around the sun. What? So you can't prove it, but you're going to reify it. Okay. Could it be that you're only saying that an experiment will never prove it because one actually did go in favor of one direction? Just a second. Sorry about that. 1764, Dr. Erasmus Darwin founded the Masonic Lunar Society. They met monthly during the full moon in Soho House. All were given the Merchant of Light title. James Wilkinson, industrialist. James Watt, inventor. Matthew Bolton, manufacturer. Joseph Priestley, chemist. Josiah Wedgwood, pottery. Benjamin Franklin, founding father. So, when people say, oh, you think everybody's in on it? You think people from different areas have a similar goal? That's impossible, you conspiracy theorist. When you hear the surname Darwin, Charles Darwin and his theories of evolution are the only things that come to mind. However, his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, is a fascinating man and a Freemason. Brother Darwin was born on December 12, 1731 to Robert Darwin and Elizabeth Hill in Elston, England. His father was a prominent lawyer and physician. And he is named after his ancestor Erasmus Earl, who was a common sergeant of law under Oliver Cromwell. After primary school, he attended St. John's College and the University of Edinburgh Medical School. His work in the medical field was unmatched at the time, so much that he was offered and declined to be court physician for King George III. While working, he could document his findings, observations, and ideas in different books and poems. One of these books, Zoonomia, dealt with all biological life and theorized the concept of evolution. Another book of his used the ideas of great thinkers like Locke and Rousseau to justify the formal education of women, believing that they should be educated in science and philosophy. In 1755, Brother Darwin began to form the Lunar Society. This society was a social group of learned men who met together and discussed different ideas on full moons. Some men in the group included Dr. William Small, who taught Thomas Jefferson at William and Mary College, engineer James Watt, who improved the steam engine, and chemist Joseph Priestley, who discovered oxygen and the carbon cycle. Prominent American Benjamin Franklin visited the Lunar Society and developed a lifelong friendship with Brother Darwin. After moving to Derby, England in 1788, he became a Mason at Canongate Kilwinning Lodge No. 2 in Scotland. His activity in lodge is not known, but Masonry continued in his family with his sons Francis Darwin and later Reginald Darwin. Dr. Erasmus Darwin was the first man in England to suggest those ideas, which were later to be embodied in a Darwinian theory by his grandson Charles Darwin. Oh, this is another Freemasonic bio. Well informed on all aspects of late 18th century science and medicine, he had also advanced ideas on cosmology and evolution, which he recorded in a verse of high quality before coming to Derby in 1788. So that's the quote I already put in there. In fact, this very same tradition was practiced by Darwin himself. In hopes of maintaining the genetic superiority of his bloodline, Darwin married the youngest granddaughter of his maternal father, researcher Ian Taylor, reveals the results in his inbreeding project. Darwin's idea of inbreeding to produce superior stock can be seen to be a complete disaster in the case of his own 10 children. Of the 10, one girl, Mary, died shortly after birth. Another girl, Anne, died at the age of 10 years. His eldest daughter, Henrietta, had a serious and prolonged breakdown at 15. 3 of his sons suffered such frequent illnesses that Darwin regarded them as semi-invalids, while his last son, Charles Jr., was born mentally retarded and died in 1858. Okay? So let's just follow these people. Let's do that. And this is just a brief detour because this is about the Luciferian scientific dictatorship. So I do have to touch on some things here. The British Masonic Royal Society promoted the theory of Charles Darwin through Freemason Thomas Huxley. In 1850, Huxley, with no obvious accomplishments to his name, was made a Fellow of the Royal Society at the relatively young age of 26. As the major protagonist for the theory of evolution, Huxley encouraged Darwin, a timid man, to put his evolutionary thoughts on paper. Huxley therefore became an official spokesman for the recluse Darwin. The 33rd degree Supreme Council of Mizraim Freemasonry at Paris reveals in its minutes its promotion of evolution as a science, while they themselves scoffed at the theory. It is with this object in view that we are constantly, by means of our press, arousing a blind confidence in these theories. The intellectuals will puff themselves up with their knowledge, and without any logical verification of them, will put into effect all the information available from science, which our agent tour specialists have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Do not suppose for a moment that these statements are empty words. Think carefully of the successes we arranged for Darwinism. Freemasonry in America has picked up the mantle of Mizraim. In its March 1922 New Age magazine, it states, "The craft believes the kingdom of God is to be established among men by the evolution and development of man himself." So you got esoteric themes behind evolution, clearly. Julian Huxley and his brother Aldous Huxley had both been under the Masonic tutelage of 33 degree Freemason H.G. Wells. In the 1920s, Wells directed the brothers to 33 degree Freemason Aleister Crowley for further training. Crowley inducted them into the Golden Dawn drug-using cult, where they were trained on how to subvert a nation through drug addiction. This is the display of the eugenics congresses that they used to have, because they actually passed eugenics legislation in 30-something states in America. And this is before the so-called script over there in Germany and all that. Well, Darwin's cousin was Galton, who created modern eugenics. And Galton needed a groundwork of the pseudoscience that they presented of race and the pseudoscience of eugenics. And there is the Galton-Darwin-Wedgwood family on display at the Congress. The Royal Society. Boyle's interest in alchemy, however, masked his main occupation. With another Stuart king on the throne, his primary task was to control Charles II. He accomplished this through the Royal Society of 1660, created the same year Charles II ascended the throne. Its founders were solely Rosicrucian Masons, including the Grand Master of Sion, Robert Boyle, and the next Grand Master, Isaac Newton. Robert Boyle was close friends with the next Grand Master of Sion, even teaching him the secrets of alchemy. His name was Isaac Newton. You can see the hand in the sign of the veil. What is that? The symbology there with the hand in the shirt. I forget now. It's been so long. The Magus of Freemasonry. The mysterious life of Allias Ashmole, scientist, alchemist, and founder of the Royal Society. Okay. And I come back to Allias, because I think I'm about to wrap this one up and continue on with the Royal Society here in a minute here. I'm going to wrap this one up soon. Here's an old certificate. Freemasons in the Royal Society, alphabetical list. This is an attempt to list fellows of the Royal Society who were Freemasons. It was first issued in January 2010, and the second edition was issued in January 2012. Both have been compiled on behalf of the Library and Museum of Freemasonry by Bruce Hogg, assisted by Diane Clements. The Royal Society's website includes list of fellows from A to J and K to Z, with approximately 8,000 names recorded for the period between 1660 and 2007. There is no comparable listing of Freemasons, and their details have been drawn from a variety of sources as described below. This is unlikely to be a complete list. So, who wants to tell me that there's no connection between Freemasonry and the Royal Society? Who wants to go ahead and do that? So, I'm going to cap that off and then go further into that. Let me see what even the next... Oh my gosh. So this dude right here, and I do continue with the Royal Society, but this Mason right here, an alchemist, this was Isaac Newton's lover. I'm going to show a quote where it describes him as being intimate with this man right here. And they were so close, he was godfather of his children, dude. Forgot about this. So, in the next one, we'll go in... Well, I'll keep going with the Royal Society and go in on Newton's little dude right here. Alright, so thank you guys for checking it out. I'll see you guys for the next one, part 7. And thank you. Share and like and all that stuff if you like the content. Peace.